Hey everybody, before we hop into this video, I just want to say I recorded this best decks video with the best decks in the meta right now before Shining Revelry has dropped. So this is going to be the best decks getting ready for ranked, but things could change with the new set. Some new supporter cards could make their way in there. New things from the set could be really powerful. However, what you are looking at in this video are some of the best things in the meta currently. Of course, when the new set drops, we'll have tons of videos about what is good and what is the Cresselia of that set. Enjoy! With ranked coming to Pocket very soon, I think it's a good time to talk about the absolute best decks in the game. So I'm going to give you the decks that will do the best when this ranked mode launches, and one might actually really shock you. Hi everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw! Let's do this thing. What you are looking at right here is one of the best card decks. Yes, I called it a card deck here in Pokemon Pocket. This is Dialga EX, Arceus EX. Until we have a new set come out, this is probably the meta, if you will. A lot of decks perform well into it, but this is insane. Consistently performs well, wins tournaments, gets very deep. It's just an extremely difficult deck to deal with pretty much everything in the game that isn't a strong counter. This has two Dialgas, two Arceus, a Shaman from Spacetime Smackdown, and a Mew EX. So let's talk about this a little bit here. The idea behind this deck is getting Dialga as quickly as you can into the active spot so that it can power up either Arceus or Mew EX, and then you can start sweeping your opponents. Obviously, the Mew and Arceus, your decision on kind of which one is going to do damage is going to depend on what you're running into on the other side. For instance, if you're running into Charizard on the other side and you have a Mew EX on your bench with 2 energy attached to it, Charizard is never safe to go out, right? There are a lot of cards that deal as much damage as their HP is, so Mew is a great threat to all those cards. And then you have Arceus that will just consistently be able to do 130 damage as long as you have a bench. The rest of your deck is going to have multiple Leafs. These cards are here quite specifically so that you can pull something like Arceus EX out of the active spot and power Dialga, and vice versa. Oftentimes though, it's to get Dialga into the active spot. This deck absolutely loves to play on turn 2. That way you would be able to power as quickly as possible. You have a couple Professors, couple Pokeballs, a Cyrus, Sabrina, Giovanni, which helps you for some really nice KO breakpoints, a couple of potions, capes, and 1 Rocky Helmet. Again, this is the meta and without question one of the best decks in the game. Now, I have to be honest with you as I go through the rest of this video. I am going to give you the best decks. These aren't necessarily the decks that I'm going to be playing most of the time in ranked. It's not always the most fun thing for me to be playing the most meta thing, but if you want the most competitive decks, that's what I'm giving you here in this video. So come along with me to deck number dos. That stands for 2 in French. The next deck, in fact, the next 2 decks I'm going to kind of like have in this one spot here, and they are 2 amazing fighting decks. I want to talk to you first about Lucario Rampardos. Lucario Rampardos is a great deck in general. With no EX cards, you are only giving up a single point every time a Pokemon goes down. Lucario powers up your Marshadow, your Sudowoodo, and of course your Rampardos. Rampardos with 1 Lucario on the board will do 150 damage, 170 to something like Arceus because it is weak to fighting. So this deck absolutely eats up the Arceus Dialga deck for lunch, as well as many other strong decks. I mean, it is a one-hit KO machine. You've got Cranidos, Rampardos, and of course 2 Skull Fossils. The only thing that makes this deck a little less than ideal at times is sometimes your fossils can be buried all the way at the center of the earth, right? You're just not able to get them there near that molten core. The rest of your deck, 2 Professors, Sabrina, Cyrus, Pokemon Communications, 2 of them, and 2 Pokeballs. With your deck here, you are looking ideally to get Rampardos out as quickly as possible, Sudowoodo in the active spot if you are fighting against an EX Pokemon. Otherwise, you could have your Riolu, you could have your Marshadow, but oftentimes your Sudowoodo is kind of that main tank sitting in the front there while you power up everything else. Again, Rampardos online, this thing cracks for an insane amount of damage and only takes recoil damage if you pick up a KO, which is something interesting to note. This deck is also not at all starved for energy. 2 energy cost on the stage 1 Lucario and 2 energy cost on Marshadow. That's it. Everything else is 1 energy, low retreat cost almost across the board. This deck is extremely consistent, extremely powerful, and again, the only thing you really need to worry about is kind of bricking on your fossils, which does happen from time to time. Now, if you like fighting decks, this next one could be right up your alley because it features Sneaky Lee. If you've been watching me for a little while, hey, how you doing? If you haven't been watching me for a bit, hey, how you doing? I guess I'm flirting with new people. This deck right here is Ralts Kirlia into Glade EX with Marshadow, which is an amazing revenge KO, and of course, Hitmonlee. Now, the variant I'm pulling up right here is an interesting one that did well in a tournament recently. I don't know if you'd necessarily need to be running Mars in a deck like this. You could probably run another Pokemon comms instead, but let's take a look at it here. So this has 2 Cyrus. Obviously, when you have Hitmonlee, you can make so many amazing plays with this. It has a Sabrina as well, so you can bring up a full HP Pokemon to that active spot. 2 Pokeballs, of course, 2 Research, 2 Rocky Helms, and a Pokemon Communication as well as Mars. When 2 of your Pokemon go down, or if Glade EX goes down, you can play Mars and clear your opponent's hand of everything but 1 card, which can get you out of some pretty sticky situations if they have Cyrus or something like that. But your main thought with this deck is getting Hitmonlee into that active spot. You'll be able to snipe away things like Magikarp if your opponent is playing a deck like that, even attacking some, backline threats that you would like to pull in with Glade. A lot of decks right now are powering up their backline with something in the front line, thinking about Dialga, thinking about Manaphy, things like that, right? So you will be able to snipe the bench, pull them in with Cyrus, and then KO them with Glade. Glade only requires 2 energy, Hitmonlee requires 1, Marshadow 2, so this deck is really nice because it also, like our other fighting deck, requires no extra energy generation. You are easily able to power everything in this deck, and it is a huge counter to Arceus Dialga. Glade loves when their opponents have a ton of energy on them, and a lot of decks in the meta right now have that requirement, right? They all want like 3 or 4 energy on them, and Glade just comes in and mops them up. In a minute here, I'm going to talk to you about the actual probably best deck for ranked, and I kind of hate to say it, but before we get into it, let's talk about a couple others that have been doing well recently. The next deck that is doing really well in the meta right now is kind of coming out, not really of nowhere, but it's sort of sneaking its way in after being a decent Space-Time Smackdown deck, is Darkrai EX, Weavile EX. Darkrai Weavile has been good since Space-Time Smackdown, but there's been something really nice about this set for it, and I think some of the biggest reason is it does really well into these low-cost fighting decks that want to just get a couple energy on them and start sweeping some of the bigger Pokemon like Dialga. This deck can KO them very, very fast. So you have Darkrai dealing its damage with Nightmare Aura, of course, every time you put a Dark Energy on it. You have Weavile that does extra damage if your opponent has any damage on it, and it only takes 1 energy to power. This deck has multiple Cyrus, Professor's Research Pokeballs. It also has a couple of Leafs, Sabrinas, Dawn, a Pokemon Comms, and 2 Giant Capes. The whole idea behind this deck is getting your Darkrai not into the active spot, that's why you have multiple Leafs, pulling it out of the active spot, getting Weavile in the active, putting energy on Darkrai, and then having Weavile clean up everything else. With Sabrina and Cyrus, you can also punish your opponent for trying to power something on the backline or hide some of their Pokemon from you. You also, in this deck, have Dawn as a play. Now, not every deck like this runs Dawn, but this deck does set up a really powerful combo where you put 1 energy onto Darkrai, it deals damage to the active spot, you then Dawn that energy up to Weavile, and then boom, you are clapping your opponents for 90 damage in a single turn very, very early for just 1 energy. It is a great combination, and it's really cool actually seeing this deck kind of come back into the meta because everything was Darkrai Magnezone for so long, which, just by the way, the Magnezone decks are still very solid. Now, I am going to talk to you about the best decks possibly for ranked right here, and I don't love to say this, but I'm just going to give it to you straight. Palkia 18 Trainer and Articuno 18 Trainer are probably, now we don't know how the rank system is going to perform, at least when I was recording this video, I didn't know the exact format of it, but given that it is probably going to be a format where playing more games with a decently consistent deck is more ideal than playing just a couple games with a deck that is slightly better, it would mean that something like Palkia 18 Trainer and Articuno 18 Trainer are actually the best ranked decks. You will be able to quickly get into games with very little thought. You are either winning or losing, and you are moving on very fast. You will also get your opponents to concede against you as soon as you hit a couple heads on a Misty. I don't love it, but I just have to be honest that I do think they're probably the best ranked decks in the game, depending on how the ladder works. Now, once you get higher and higher, if there is some sort of point system, once you hit a rank threshold, I'm assuming the game is going to move you through certain ranks, and then when you kind of get to the top rank in the game, you'll have a point system that goes up and down. At that point, I don't think these are absolutely the best, but depending on point gain and losses, they still kind of could be. So the idea behind these decks is that you only have 2 Pokemon in your deck, 2 Palkias or 2 Articunos. I guess you could have an Articuno and a Palkia if you're an absolute maniac. And then the rest of your deck is filled with tools, trainer cards, everything you need. Cyruses, Misties, Sabrinas, Irida. It's just it's a whole lot of a monstrous deck. I do have to warn you though, if you are playing this deck and you are playing it in ranked, you will lose valuable family and friends in your life because they will recognize that there's something dark inside your soul. But again, I'm giving you the best of the best, and I really do think, based on however the rank system goes in this game, this is probably the smartest deck to play, just for time's sake, decision making, quickly winning or losing games and moving on. Palkia or Articuno 18 Trainer. Ugh. I want to talk to you also about a couple water decks that are doing very well right now. This is Palkia EX Origin Form Palkia Manaphy. This deck won the Spragels Hooglandia Open recently. It's a really good deck. It's been performing extremely well in tournaments. This is a more complex version of the 18 trainers, right? You have multiple other Pokemon in your deck. The Manaphy and Origin Form Palkia give you the option of sort of losing a single point before your Palkia comes in and fights, right? You have to think in a deck how you want it to go point-wise. So you either have a deck where you're kind of losing 2 EX Pokemon, so you're losing 4 points, or you have a deck where I'm getting a phone call. Hold on, we're pausing. Sorry about that. I was just getting a call from the deck police and they were telling me I was under arrest for the Articuno 18 trainer thing. So yeah, I understand that. Now I'm talking about Palkia, Manaphy, Origin Form Palkia. As I was mentioning before, in a lot of decks, you have to decide how you're going to give up your points to your opponents. That can either be 2 1-pointers and an EX or 2 EXs, right? Ideally, you want to give up as many points as possible if you are losing, rather than giving up a single point and an EX. And this deck avoids that, right? You have Origin Form Palkia that can give up a point, Manaphy that can give up a point, and then Palkia that can give up 2 points. Origin Form actually does some pretty solid damage. Half the time it is doing 60, the other half the time 120, so it is an average of 90 damage every time you are attacking with it, with 120 HP. We have a couple Professors, couple Pokeballs, Cyrus, Sabrina, of course 2 Iridas, of course 2 Misties, some Giant Capes, and 2 Leafs. The Leafs are almost entirely there to either move Origin Form or move Palkia so that you can get Manaphy in and power the rest of your deck. This thing is just insanely good. Probably the least cringe water deck that you can win with while still being a water deck. And water, they're my favorite Pokemon, but what can you say? There are so many crazy good water cards in Pocket right now, and it just feels kind of gross. So I hit you with some of the absolute best decks for ranked right now. I'm gonna come at you with another video, hitting you with a ton of, apparently I'm hitting you a lot with these videos, man. Every time a video of mine comes up, people are like, whoa! I'm gonna get you with a video about some of the best decks that are not the most meta things in the game, but they're still really, really good. There's so many decks I didn't talk about in this video, so I will have another one coming very soon, showing the best kind of off-meta decks. Still really good decks that perform very, very well. They're just not kind of like the top 5 or 6 decks in the game. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thank you everybody for checking out what I do. I really appreciate it. If you like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell. It does mean a lot to me. So thank you. We recently hit 100K subs and very grateful to all of you. Thank you. I'll see you soon. We did it.